Your literary happy hour.
Fun show.
I want you to find the next author you're going to love.
On a more serious note.
Welcome to the Whiskey Bar.
Bring my hands up like, you know what the...
Whatever happens, probably will.
So what are we drinking? Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey. I'm going to call Triple Shots. And I'm going to call it that because we're going to keep with the drinking theme. Today I have 3 stories for you. I'm going to be reading to you from my short story anthology, Without Expiration. We have The Guest by T.D. Johnston, which was on episode 1 of Writers Drinking Whiskey. Highly recommend you view the whole thing. And I'm going to be previewing an upcoming episode with Jim Kearney, who's going to read his just hilarious dramatic monologue. And you're going to know he's now retired, but was a longtime high school teacher because he has the teenage voice to a T. No cocktail recipes today, no life hacks. The usual camaraderie, go to the regular episodes for that. Today it's just going to be down and dirty with the shots. We're going to get 3 of them in. Hope you enjoy, and I'll get us started. Bermuda Triangle. It would be darling to be a poet. Yes, that's what strikes my fancy at the moment. I want to describe the bulb of a mother's belly when she first shows as the mound in the sand of a betrayed pirate. That's an unsettling image. Don't you poets write pretty things like sonnets and ballads? Rubbish, Charles. American education is so crass. Poets make interesting observations, not pretty ones. I see. But who would bury a betrayed pirate? She looked into his eyes searchingly. I would. I'd bury him right there on the beach, so he could still smell the sea. Have you been to Bermuda? No. I've never been. But I saw a picture in an encyclopedia when I was a schoolgirl, and I can still remember how real the sensation of sand clinging to my feet felt. Bermuda is the child of a shipwreck, you know. Pilgrims on their way to the New World crashed there and didn't have any way off, so they started a colony. That's romantic, if an accident ever can be romantic. That's how all colonies should be started, with a shipwreck. Accidents are far more romantic than anything planned. She kissed his chest. I don't think I'll ever forget the smell of your cologne, no matter how long it's been. I like the way your hair feels against my chest. This mop, it's so unmanageable and frizzy. I should do it for you more. You do it for me enough. She nestled closer, wrapping her leg around his belly. I've always believed that whole philosophy of the one was rubbish, complete hogwash. But as far as chests go, yours is definitely the one. Only your accent can make the word hogwash sound poetic. It feels good to hear someone responding to my voice again. For months now, Terrence has only been home long enough to sleep. It's impossible for a wife to compete when her husband's mistress is himself. The best thing you can do if you want to ignore someone is marry them. Oh, he was ignoring me long before we were married. He's a scoundrel. I could never marry you. We're all scoundrels, darling. He just knows how to fulfill himself with a completeness I never could. Why should I want to leave the needs of someone I love unfulfilled? You don't love him. Why? Because I can stay away from him? Because I don't cry or bleed for him? Maybe that is love. Don't talk about him. I can't bear it. So interesting, the things we can and cannot bear. There never seems to be any sense to it, yet somehow it all makes perfect sense. My American education couldn't understand that. I can see the Irish in your face when you're witty. Your nostrils redden and flare. With a finger, she flicked the tip of his nose. Tell me, do you talk to your wife this way? Yes. Does she lay her head on your chest? Yeah. As she should. It's a perfectly brilliant chest for laying your head upon. Terrence has always been too bony for my taste. Please. I just want to forget about him. You men, such weak bellies and fragile egos. I don't mind thinking of you and your wife at all. In fact, fascinated by it. The thought of you laying together so intimately, yet you with so many shadows. So much of you I know she doesn't. I like being the mistress in that way. A wife is such a dreary, predictable role. Amelia, there's nothing predictable about you. No, don't move. I was just adjusting my arm. Can you hear that? I think it's starting to rain. She paced her finger up his forearm. I wonder what our baby would look like. Frizzy hair and soft chest, I'd bet. She smiled. You always did make me laugh. You do make me laugh. He tightened his grip around her. Amelia, we could, you know. Let's not talk about those things. Not now. Is there anything I can do? Yes. Be the Bible. Be Shakespeare. Tell me everything and nothing at all. To be or not to be, thou shalt not? I pity the children born here. With his free hand, he stroked her from shoulder to elbow. I miss the way your skin feels pressed against mine. My skin, it's so dry. I really should moisturize more often. She examined her left hand against the backdrop of his chest. Do you think you'll ever tell her about us? I'd lose everything if I did. You'd be nothing without her, and I'd still want you. Your wife cares only about her marriage, nothing about you. I'm not sure I'd love you if I were nothing. Rubbish. It's only then that you could love me at all. She traced his ribcage with her cheek. I wonder what it would feel like to have a little foot kick me in the ribs. I can kick you if you want to find out. Not funny, Charles. I'm kidding. I can never kick you with this bum knee. How did you do it with the other women? How did you remain so impassive when they came crying to you? When their hearts were slit for you? He examined the ceiling, drawing daisies with his finger on her shoulder. I explained that it was a stage of grief. And once they were past the deal-making phase, they'd be able to move on. And I never grieved. You know, I never expected this to happen. I took my wedding vows quite seriously when I was making them. But a man with a chest like Terrence's can give you such a knot in the neck. Don't talk of him. I like to imagine it's just you and me when we're together. Just our skin and heartbeats. But it's not just you and me and our heartbeats. I know. That's what scares me. I think I will be a poet. She laid her hand on his belly. I do like the image of the soft white lump of a pirate buried in a shallow grave. I think I'll always remember it. Even if I do decide I want to forget. We could, Amelia. I would. Hush. My darling, nothing. It's only a stage of grief.
This story is from my collection Friday Afternoon and Other Stories, and this story is called The Guest. The answering machine down the hall in the kitchen clicked on after the fourth ring. Carl stared warily at the portable phone atop the dust-blanketed printer, ready to answer, maybe, if the caller wasn't from the home office. He waited for Rachel's tired voice to finish the greeting. The machine beeped. "Carl, it's me." Her voice wafted from the kitchen, attractive but irritating in its "I know what you're doing" kind of way. "Pick up, honey. It's about dinner." Carl heaved himself out of his black swivel desk chair, sighed heavily, and picked up the portable. "Hey, Ray," he breathed. Just getting some work out of the way. What's up?" The silence at the other end made Carl certain that she somehow knew of his mornings spent with TV Land and the Superstation. But he really had been working since lunch. He really had. "Carl, you mind if someone from the office joins us for dinner tonight? He's new and doesn't know anybody. You mind, sweetie?" "Please, Ray, not tonight. I'm in no frame of mind." "I guess that's fine. What time? I'm not cleaned up." Instinctively, Carl combed the fingers of his right hand through his tousled dark hair as if she could see him in his funk. "Not until about 8, I think. I should have time to get home and fix something by then. Okay if I tell him to come by about 8? "Idol's on at 9. Remind her." "Sounds like a plan, Ray. 8. Damn it, man. Speak." "You're so sweet. I know you wanted to see your show. I'll make it up to you, baby." "I sincerely doubt it." "No problem, Ray. Any friend of yours." "See you about 7, she said, and hung up. Carl returned the phone to the top of the printer. He tried to refocus on the spreadsheet before him on the computer monitor. It was no use. 3 months on the new job, and already he was sick of telecommuting. Tired constantly. He'd wondered recently whether he was sick or whether leaving the school world for that of business was indeed killing him. Either way, the last thing in the world he wanted this evening was to host some hotshot broker from Rachel's firm. He'd never leave before Idol, for sure. "Why didn't you just say so?" "What the hell," he muttered. "It's just a couple of hours out of a lifetime." Carl wandered into the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of warm, flat Coke from a 2-liter container on the island. He downed the soda in several swallows, rubbing his left thumb absently against an orange juice stain on the counter. He walked into the living room where the television was still on from his lunch date with Matlock 5 hours ago. He stretched out on the sofa nearest the television, aware of his lethargy, annoyed by the phone call, and swiftly fell asleep. A sound, abrupt, like a thud or whack, awakened him. He groggily wiped dried drool from the left corner of his mouth, rose slowly, and looked around him. Much of the light had gone from the room, and though the vertical blinds were drawn over the sliding glass door leading to the balcony, he could tell that evening was falling fast. He entered the kitchen and glanced at the range clock. 6:46. Jesus. Just enough time before Rachel gets. The rap at the door was heavy, assertive. Carl vaguely wondered whether a knock was what awoke him in the first place. He bent down in front of the range door and used his reflection to smooth his hair and tuck his wrinkled white button down into his jeans. Maybe she's got groceries. Door's not even locked. Carl cleared his throat and strolled slowly toward the door. The knock came again, almost obnoxious in its insistence. "Coming," he said, hoping that the knocker, especially if it was Rachel, would detect the disapproval in his tone. Carl opened the bluish-gray metal door. Before him stood a well-groomed man of about 35, his sandy blonde hair slicked back in a style which reminded Carl of Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street. The man wore an unnecessary tan trench coat, unbuttoned over a dark blue pinstriped suit. "Yes?" Carl asked, a bit uncomfortable when the man's casual stance, hands in pockets, slouching to the right, eyes on Carl's. "I believe I'm early. You mind?" "Oh, you must be Rachel's guest." The man straightened and removed his hands from his pockets. "I suppose I am. May I come in? Or shall we plan to dine in the hallway?" Sure. Please come in." Carl stepped aside, and the guest strode confidently past him, removing his trench coat as he walked. He was several inches over 6 feet, like Carl, but considerably less filled out. Lithe, like a tennis player. Carl guessed that they were about the same age, but this fellow was dramatically more fit. 5 years earlier, Carl reflected, and that certainly would not have been true. He'd become sedentary since he and Rachel had gotten married 2 years ago, but he had resolved just a couple of weeks ago to begin working out again, soon. The guest held the trench coat out toward Carl as if expecting Carl to put it away. Carl, irritated by the suggestion of superiority, made a suggestion of his own. "Oh, just throw it anywhere. We haven't fixed the place up much yet. Any old chair will do." "Okie doke," the man replied, and dumped the coat on the dining table. "You know, we might be using that for dinner." The guest stuck out his hand, smiling smugly. "Your wife didn't give me your name." "She didn't?" "Oh, it's Carl." Carl shook the man's hand and was immediately turned off by the guest's dead fish handshake, the kind that sometimes made Carl think a man might be a tad light in the loafer. But something about this man seemed as straight as James Bond. Insincere. That's what that handshake says. "Hi, Carl. Can a man buy a drink around here?" The man stepped into the living room and sank into Carl's red leather chair. "I didn't catch your name," Carl offered. "You're over an hour early." Carl forced a smile. "And you know damn well a red leather chair is never for a guest. Never." The guest shifted comfortably in the chair and placed his wing-tipped feet on the red leather ottoman, crossing the left wingtip over the right. "Smith," he said, examining his fingernails. "Oh, come on." I see. What's your first name?" The seated man responded with an incisive look in Carl's direction, followed by a return to scrutinizing his fingernails. "John." He smiled and looked back up at Carl. "John will have a screwdriver, Carl." "She'll be home any minute." "The screwdriver. You got it, John." Carl turned to go into the kitchen, but the guest's voice stopped him. "Stoli, Carl, if you don't mind." "We don't have Stoli. We have Smirnoff." Carl tried to make the words sound informative, but was irritated to hear them emerge defensive. He stood waiting for the guest's response, and got it. Okay, big spender. That did it. Carl crossed to the sofa between the guest and the front hall and sat heavily. He tried to stare at the man called John, but looked away when the guest regarded him with an amused look. Look, John, Carl said quietly, looking at the mauve carpet. I don't know you, but this is my apartment. You're sitting in my chair. You're over an hour early for dinner. You're my wife's guest, not mine. So please, I don't know where you come off being so rude, but I ask you, please, don't try my patience. Carl risked a glance at the guest. The man's eyes clouded briefly, but the quick return of the confident expression forced Carl's eyes back to the floor. This is your landlord's apartment, Carl. He's just letting you pay to borrow it for a while. By the way, are you going to make yourself presentable for dinner? You unemployed or something? Need a couple of bucks? Did he hear a word I said? How could Rachel invite a man like this to our new home? I guess I want to know why you're so early. The guest reversed wingtips on the ottoman. Carl, I'm a successful stockbroker. I know how to pick them. The winners and the losers. I believe in being direct. And I believe that some people have got it and some people haven't. He re-examined his fingernails. You, most assuredly, haven't got it, Carl. Carl had had two bosses speak to him this way in the 2 years since he'd left the teaching profession in search of more money. He'd allowed them both to get away with it. Not this time. Get out of my house, he whispered, staring at a single fuzzy strand of carpet next to his bare right foot. I thought you wanted to know why I'm early, Carl. The strand appeared to be moving, ever so slightly. No, I want you to leave. I'm early because I wanted you to know that I plan to acquire your wife. You plan to? Certainly. You see, Carl, I know how to pick them. She's a winner. You're not. Simple math. It's not adding up to 2, big fellow. Get out of my home before I, the guest laughed heartily. Before you throw a box of Frosted Flakes at me, Carl. Get real. You're nothing. At least, that's what your wife says. Man, you should hear her talk about it. About how much it sucks to be out there involved with life while you watch I Dream of Jeannie and Matlock and feel up your computer every day. And so soon after you've moved into this drab little apartment. Carl leaped to his feet. I have a job, an important job. The guest remained comfortable in the red leather chair. Sit down, Carl. Carl wavered, caught, as he so often was these days, between what he wanted to do and what he would do. He returned to his seat. Carl, you've been married, what, 2 years? Your wife tells me you're lousy in bed, have no ambition. And she married you because she thought she'd never meet a man like me. Biological clock and all that crap. Most women I've known are in the same boat as your wife, except they married to gain access to resources, big fella. Resources for them and their kids. So they stay with their husbands and play happy house for their friends and their alumni magazines, but not your wife. She didn't marry you for resources, Carl. So you're smack out of luck. You don't have access to offer your wife, Carl, or ambition, or energy, or passion. So you can give her to me. Carl summoned the courage he thought he needed to defend himself. If I had a gun, I swear I'd kill you, he breathed. If you had a gun, I swear you'd stick the barrel in your mouth. An ache spread in Carl's throat, and he fought the tears that would embarrass him in front of this monster. Rachel would never say those things, he rasped. Never. She would, and she did. Just this morning, as a matter of fact. How about that fancy screwdriver, big fellow? She'll be here any minute now. We'll ask her. She knows my new job has possibilities. And I don't watch television all day. And we love each other a lot. So you're not so smart. If you don't leave now, I'll have you arrested. Mind telling me what law I'm breaking, big fellow? Where is she? Why did she let him come here ahead of her? She must have gotten tied down at work, unless... The guest rose and crossed the living room to the balcony door. He opened the vertical blinds to reveal the last shades of dusky gray, gasping for air as night pressed its weight down upon the day. Carl, the reason I'll succeed in acquiring your wife, the man said as he turned from the glass doors, is that I am in possession of something that is not exactly one of your assets. Please, I don't want to hear your passion, big fella. That's what she'll see in me that she doesn't see in you. Passion for all that interests me. I don't live my life through a computer screen, Carl. I don't entertain myself or others with a television set. I possess both. They don't possess me. And I will possess your wife because I have the resource to which she wants access. She's better than all the other women I've known, Carl, because the resource she wants from a man is passion. The guest took a step toward Carl. Passion for all that interests me, Carl. I don't hide anything. I think you see that already. And it's why you already know you will lose her to me. The guest's face was inches from Carl's. Now get me that screwdriver before I passionately beat you to a pathetic pulp. Carl, tears streaming down his cheeks, the churns of self-pity alive in his gut, turned and retreated toward the kitchen. She would be here soon. As he opened the cabinet which housed the liquor, he looked out toward the living room. His eye was drawn by movement, past the furniture, past the visitor who rocked cockily on his feet with his hands in his pockets. The movement was, from this distance, a mangle of colors that changed every second or two, seemingly for no reason at all. As his right hand closed on the bottle of vodka, his wet eyes focused more clearly on the constantly shifting images coming from the far corner of the living room. The more the images shifted, the more the churning in Carl's gut turned to rage. He had never turned off the television set. Suddenly, the ludicrousness of his life pointed a forefinger at him. It poked him in the chest like a bully in a schoolyard. Carl set his jaw. He examined the bottle in his hand, The rage climbed out of his gut and into his arms and legs as he rushed madly toward the guest, charged past him, surprised him with his decisiveness, and smashed the vodka bottle into the television screen, obliterating the blather of a news show into countless pieces of dark glass. Turning, he faced John Smith. Drool ran from the left corner of Carl's mouth, but he did not care. Smith focused on the drool and put his hands up in self-defense. Carl advanced toward the guest, the reek of vodka filling the room, his right hand holding high the shattered bottle. He would kill this man, just as he'd killed the television set and the morons who lived in it. He would end this man who had come into his home and been so insightful. Carl stopped. He saw the fear in the man's eyes, but saw something else, something which didn't fit. It was pleasure, but no longer mocking or cocky, just pleased, frightened, and pleased. Get out of my home now. There's no supper for you here. The guest wasted no time in retrieving his trench coat from the dining table. As he put the coat on and advanced toward the front door, the guest turned and faced Carl. I'll find my supper somewhere else, big fellow. And the guest exited quietly. Carl, exhilarated and strangely clear-headed, returned to the kitchen and carefully laid the bottle remnant on the counter next to the microwave. His heart raced as he returned to the living room and sat confidently in his red leather chair. As he cooled off in the silence, he remembered fondly the first months with Rachel, nearly 3 years ago, the year before the wedding, the year before the career change, the constant, gorgeous music, the slow dances before bed, touch football Sunday mornings in the park with strangers and friends alike, weekend drives to the beach where they played putt-putt at low tide, digging holes with their hands for a 9-hole course. They had passed books between each other, classics, thrillers, spy novels, short stories, poetry, and always the music. They had made love to Santana's Europa and Stan Getz's Keep Me in Your Heart, seldom forgetting Pat Metheny's The Truth Will Always Be. Each time was exquisitely unlike any other, as they celebrated the passing of a day that had never happened before, and the coming of one the world had never seen. Carl wondered where it had gone. He didn't think, now, sitting here amid the piercing scent of vodka, that any of it had ever gotten old. That first year together, he'd leapt out of bed each morning, the spring staying in his step all day as he taught his classes with a verve which enlivened even the most reticent students. As he remembered, he thought back to when he had taught Richter's The Light in the Forest. Strange that only now did he recall the line from the slave character, Bijance, about any man being a slave if he pulls burdens which mean nothing to the soul inside of him. And he had missed her each day in the best of ways, the kind that says, I get to see her again. He rose from the red leather chair and sank back into the sofa nearest the deceased television set. She liked to sit here, to read here. She still did, while he sat toad-like in front of his computer terminal down the hall in the den, visiting inane websites and other substitutes for real living. When When did it begin? He pressed his face against the back cushion, trying to catch her scent, but the vodka's smell was more powerful and more recent. He tried and tried and tried, deep, heaving sniffs of air against the cushion, but he just couldn't quite catch it. Not right here, but he would, if I haven't lost her. A sound, abrupt, like a thud or whack, awakened him. He groggily wiped dried drool from the left corner of his mouth, rose slowly, and looked around him. Much of the light had gone from the room, and though the vertical blinds were drawn over the sliding glass door leading to the balcony, he could tell that evening was falling fast. He entered the kitchen and glanced at the range clock, 6:46. Jesus, just enough time before... Wait a minute. He could smell her. She was at the door. He was sure of it. Thrilled, he hurried into the living room and turned off the television set, glancing with disdain as he did so at the two nitwits pontificating on some useless, idiotic subject that had nothing whatever to do with him. He ran to the front door and flung it open. And there she stood, groceries in both arms. What a beautiful woman she is. What a beautiful woman you are, he blurted, and took the groceries from his puzzled wife, who followed him into the kitchen. Sweetie, she said, as he set the bags down and kissed her. Are you all right? Of course I'm all right. I'll pick the music tonight if you don't mind. The music? Why, that's fine. But I thought you wanted to watch Idol. It's Wednesday. You don't like to miss the elimination show. Not me. I'll go take a quick shower. Join me? She looked around her as if she expected someone to jump out and end the joke. Really? She said, a smile growing. Really, in case your friend is early. She slapped her right palm against her forehead as if she'd forgotten something. Oh my God, Carl. I'm so sorry. I forgot to call you. What? What is it, Ray? Frank got called away by a client about an hour ago. She took a playful step forward and began unbuttoning Carl's shirt. Is that so? Carl asked as he cupped her hands lightly while they did their deft work. That's so, big fellow, she said, kissing his chest as she pulled the shirt away. He asked for a rain check, said he'll find his supper somewhere else. Carl laughed softly at the man's obvious inability to separate the good things in life from the mundane. He scooped his wife into the air and down the hall, wondering on the way whether perhaps they shouldn't step out to Geordie's later for Stoley screwdrivers and some swing.
We're filling Vice of Fools, and it is dramatic monologue. So, one thing I've always believed in is not letting yourself get played for a sucker. I don't mean clowning around like one of the guys plays a practical joke on you or something. What I mean is by some girl. Now, I believe this since I got into high school 3 years ago as a freshman. Now that I'm a senior, I believe even more firmly in it. So far, I got to admit, I've been doing all right. I've always had the upper hand. No chick has ever suckered me, and like I said, none ever will if I can help it. Now, I'll admit I've gone back on my ideas in the last 2 years. One thing I've always said was that I'd never go steady senior year. Now, I did that, but you got to understand a couple of things before you could jump into any hasty conclusions about what kind of a guy I am for going back on my word. It was like this, see. All the girls in my class were already going steady. At least the ones I wanted to take out. There was nothing I could do. I monkeyed around for a while, took out a couple of girls from Grand Rapids. That's a town about 5 or 6 miles from where I live, but they didn't do too much anything to me. It's not that I thought I was too good for them, you understand? It's just that I didn't think I could fall for them in a big way. You know how it is. Well, anyway, there was this one sophomore in school who wasn't bad. In fact, she was pretty nice looking. I'd never seen her before this, and I was kind of interested. It started out kind of funny. In the first place, after I found out her name, I forgot it. Had to ask this buddy of mine again a couple days later. Now, the thing that was peculiar about that was that it was the first time that ever happened. Usually I couldn't forget a name for nothing. I don't know how in the heck I forgot her as being interested like I was and all. Well, anyhow, the second time I remembered it. I saw her dance one weekend after school started, and I danced with her just one set, a fast one. Anyway, right in the middle of this song, the power went off and the whole place blacked out. All the girls were screaming, and the guys were making wolf calls and whistling like they were going to really move her, like they were going to take advantage of the fact that it was dark when they knew damn well that they weren't. I guess one thing that really impressed me right there was that she didn't scream or act scared or anything, in spite of the fact she was only a sophomore and kind of immature as sophomores are prone to be. I mean, not that it's their fault or anything, but she just took it right in stride. Well, I didn't dance with her again that night, but I saw her in school that week and said hi and all that jazz, but going wild over her, and I didn't want that to happen. Well, the next Friday night at the dance, I saw her again and decided to ask her home. Now, that's considered all right around here, and everybody does it. If you ask me, it's a lot less expensive and a lot less trouble than bringing them to dance. It's a date. At least you aren't stuck with one all night. Anyway, as I was about to say, I asked her home, and she seemed kind of apprehensive. That got me wondering, but she finally said all right, so I decided not to sweat the small stuff. I found out later that her apprehension was caused by the fact that she was going with this guy. When I found that out, I kind of had to laugh, although I got to admit it was a dirty thing to do, but I didn't know, so it wasn't my fault. I got her home later than I should have that night. I didn't use my head on that one because I've been taking out older girls. In fact, she was the first girl I ever took out that was 2 years younger than myself. It never occurred to me that she'd have to go get home earlier. But I called up the next night to find out if everything was all right, and I guess it was. Well, that week in school, the guy started giving me a bad time, like always happens when you go after something new. And I started to find out a few things about her. I found out her dad was dead. She was the youngest of 7 children. Well, like I said, she was pretty nice looking and had her way with guys she'd gone with. So the guy she was going with then didn't say much, but she broke up with him pretty quick anyhow. Well, like I'm trying to get across, she was pretty spoiled. Now, that didn't sound too good, and if I was going to take her out much, she'd have to shape up because, like I said, I'm getting suckered by nobody. Well, I found out she was letting it get around that she had me right about where she wanted me. Now, this and the fact that she went out with a kid I didn't much care for, whose primary motive for taking her out was that he thought he was knifing me out, got me to the point where I decided to forget about her and I let it get around. Now, you got to understand, as far as I was concerned, I was through with her. I was about to let any girl, let alone a sophomore, shove this kid around. Well, anyway, she started talking up to one of my buddies whose sister she ran around with. She was trying to get him to fix it up with me. You know how that goes. And he told her it didn't look too good, but he'd try. Of course, first thing next morning at school, he told me all about it. So I decided maybe I was sitting pretty good right then, could do about what I wanted without looking bad. So I started playing the old cool role in school when she was around, pretending I didn't see her and crap like that when I knew damn well she was looking right at me. This usually works like a charm when I played it to its fullest capacity. Well, a couple nights later after football practice, I was standing watching a JV game, and she was about 20 feet away watching too. A bunch of sophomores played on the JV. Well, I just pretended like I was really interested in the game, like I didn't even notice her there, although I didn't much give a damn one way or the other who won the game. But pretty soon I saw her coming over to where I was standing, and all of a sudden my interest in the game increased about 300%. When she got a little ways away, she said, for a good kid, you really are stuck up. I pretended like I didn't hear her, like I was really surprised to see her there. Anyway, I said, what? And she smiled and repeated it. Now, I got to admit, that really faked me out. Most girls would let it go, but she really had guts. And she didn't get much embarrassed either. I guess that kind of impressed me. Well, I talked to her for a while, making sure with the frequent interruptions in the conversation, I paid close attention to the game to see some play that was being run. Although, like I said, I didn't much give a damn. It was just part of the role, you see. Well, we got along pretty good after that. We started going out quite regularly. In fact, it got to the point where she was the only one I was taking out. Now, this and the fact that nobody else I wanted to take out was available were the main reasons for my asking her to go steady. Just because I might as well been anyway, you see. Of course, it made it sound like it didn't make much difference to me one way or the other whether she said yes or not, but she did, just like I figured. I never would have asked her if I hadn't been pretty sure of myself. It'd be giving her the upper hand. That's one thing you don't want to do, ever. Now, I got to admit, I was going pretty wild over her. She didn't know it, of course. I kept mucking around with other girls, and she didn't say anything in spite of the fact that it bothered her. That jealousy bit is no good, and I told her how I felt about it quite a few times, so I guess she didn't want to cause any trouble. Well, about a month and a half ago, she went to this one dance that I couldn't make, and the next day some kid told me I better watch her, that she was goofing around with some guy at that dance. I started asking around. A couple other people told me the same thing. Now, this really teed me off because it made me look like a jerk. This I did not like. I talked to her first thing Monday morning at school and told her I wanted to hang the whole thing. She knew what I was talking about and kept insisting it was nothing. It's like, I'm glad he found out because I don't like to see that happen to anybody. And I wasn't going to say anything, but as long as you already know, that kind of thing gets you thinking about just exactly what kind of a sap you really are. I decided to hang it, and I did. She cried in school, didn't eat for a week and all that jazz, but that was probably an act anyhow. Well, like I said, that was a month and a half ago, and seeing as how I hadn't taken her out, I decided to be a nice guy and forget she ever did anything. I don't usually do this, you understand, but I decided to anyway, for her mainly, I guess. She was still feeling pretty bad. Anyway, she decided to play the role and turn me down. Now, that wasn't something else. I imagine she thinks I'll try again, but I'll fix her. We're through for good now. I don't much give a damn anyway. What the hell? Graduation is next week. I'm getting out of here this summer and going to college next year. So I won't see her much anymore anyway, so I guess it's the best thing. At least I didn't get played for a sucker. That's the important thing. She found out pretty fast that I don't bluff, and as far as I'm concerned, it's her tough luck. No one suckers this kid, especially not a damn little sophomore.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this triple shot of stories. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And if you like Tim's, feel free, please check out his episode. It's episode 1. It's already on the YouTube. And Jim's will be coming out later this year. It's 2023 if you're watching this future. Maybe even a ghost story there. But thank you so much again, and check out the episodes. And if you do like the channel, the usual YouTubery stuff, you can like, comment, subscribe, tell your mom. I think your mom probably likes it. Maybe your dad, but your dad's probably a drinker. Have him give me a call. We'll have a drink together. Cheers, everybody.